few years ago, I was working at a pizza chain in my hometown as a driver. I was 27, but I made darn good money delivering. I had worked at a few other places, both local and chain, in the years before, and still work as a dasher on occasion, even after this happened. Now I choose to deliver in much safer areas for this reason. I got luckier than I could ever imagine. One night I was working and I had a double, 2 deliveries to take. Both were cash orders. I had $12 left in my bank, what drivers are given to use as change for cash orders, so you don't have a ton of cash on you at all times. The first order went on smoothly. The guy gave me $50 for a $35 order, so I was excited about the nice tip. I drove to the second delivery. It was at an apartment complex with multiple buildings. I had delivered there before. The sun was about to set, but it was still very light out. The chain I worked at had us drive company cars with a logo on it, all white sedans. This is important. I grab the order and go to the door to the apartment. A young guy came out, and a much bigger, older guy was outside smoking a cigarette. The big guy went inside as the smaller guy came out. He looked around nervously and asked how much he owed me. The way he was looking around just made me very nervous. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I told him the amount, and he said that wasn't what he was told on the phone. Something was very wrong. I felt someone else walk out behind me from the door. As the first young guy looked around down the parking lot, craning his neck as if he was looking for someone. I told him the amount again, and I broke down the order for him, trying to keep calm. Then the first guy held a gun to my right temple. Shortly after that, I felt a poke on my spine. 2 gunmen. I couldn't speak. Words wouldn't form no matter how hard I tried. Give me your money and keys, now. The first guy growled, and I fumbled immediately for the keys. I gave him the keys, trying my best to remain calm. Another guy came up from my left. He had poofy hair and was around the same age as the first kid. The one behind me I hadn't seen yet. The big-haired kid grabbed the pizza bag and ran off and hid. The first kid searched the company car. Luckily, I had left my wallet in my personal car. I saw him grab my cell phone, though. That's when the panic really began to set in. I had pictures on that phone that I hadn't backed up of my then 5-year-old son, who absolutely is my world. Hey, please don't take that. I have pictures of my son who died on there. It's all I have of him, please. I lied. My son is very much alive. The kid behind me spoke softly. Trust me, just listen to him. You'll get it back undamaged. I don't want to be here either. I could tell he had been crying by how his voice sounded. A car began pulling in, and the 3 boys took off to the other end of the complex in full sprint. Before the one behind me ran, he dropped the gun in front of me. Standard issue 9mm, silver and black. Safety off. Looked completely real to me. He picked it back up and ran with the others. The car that pulled in and saw me, it was a woman and her kid. Panic set in as I realized I could easily come back and do way worse to me as the sky started to get dark. I collapsed. They had taken my company car keys, $72, the pizza, and my phone. The woman ran up to me and asked if I was alright. She took me into her apartment in the next building over and locked the door. I was shaking so hard I couldn't even hold her phone to talk to 911 as she set down her kid. Her boyfriend, I assume, helped me call. I spoke to the operator and told her everything. I'm colorblind, and these kids were obviously wearing all black and white clothes, thank God. I had a full description of 2 of them. The poor woman who helped me was going to be late for work, but she still stayed until I was off the phone and the cops had shown up. Man, she was harsh and blunt with the operator, but I will never forget this woman's utter kindness to me and her boyfriends. The cop showed up and contacted my store, and my manager brought out the spare keys for me to drive the car back to the store. After dealing with the cops, I drove back and I was greeted by crying and beyond worried coworkers. All of them were terrified that I was hurt. It meant a lot to me how much they cared, but I told them I was fine. I filed the proper paperwork, and the 72 was written off as a loss to the store. Thank God, because I had worked at the other stores that make you pay back the money out of pocket if you get robbed to prevent drivers from stealing. I was told by the owner to take the rest of the night off and take care of myself. He gave me a hug. He was, to this day, one of the best bosses I've ever had. What I didn't know was I was in for a very, very long night. I called my best friend before I left the store from the store phone and asked where he was. We usually meet up for drinks after work. He was around the corner at a bar, so I met up with him. His dad was a District 4 cop in my city at the time, the same district that this happened in. He told me his dad had given him a heads up and he had 2 shots waiting for me to calm my nerves. After the 2 shots, we began playing pool when his dad called his phone and asked if I was with him yet. He said yeah and handed me the phone. His dad asked if I could come to the station. I was honest though and I told him I'd had 2 shots, so he sent out a squad car to get me since it wasn't that far away. So we get to the station. They had suspects in custody already. I was needed to ID them. 3 boys and a driver. They had been caught less than 20 minutes after the robbery, speeding. The be on the lookout had already gone out and they matched the description. They had used the money to buy weed and gas and had taken off. They had at least 15 stolen cell phones on them. The order had been placed on a stolen phone even. My phone was in the mix in the box. The police told me to grab my phone only and I did. They asked me to unlock it. It had fingerprint verification, so that was easy. 9 of the 10 tries to unlock it had already been used before my phone would have completely reset. It unlocked. I told the police every detail yet again, although my parental instincts kicked in. I told them the guy behind me quite obviously was bullied into this and to show mercy. He was the one with the white shirt. The police went wide-eyed and told me that he was the one talking. The other 3 denied involvement. That's when I found out about the 4th guy, the driver. We found out that later he was completely unaware of the robbery and was just picking up his friends. He was never charged. The boy who was behind me and the one who grabbed the pizza were 15 and 16 and got 6 months of house arrest. The only reason the one behind me got off so easy, despite having the gun to my back, was because I asked him to go easy on him, because he was a good kid who didn't want to be there. And he was the only one confessing. Makes sense, since he even said the other guy wouldn't have the phone for long. He was planning on going to the cops had they not been caught. But the other guy, the first kid who put the gun to my temple, it was his 18th birthday. He got the book thrown at him. In the courtroom, he made fun of me and was laughing at me. Seeing him made me panic. The judge scolded him for his behavior and he just grinned and glared at me with a Joker-like grin. All I could see was pure evil. This kid will definitely commit more crimes. I have no doubt he will eventually end someone's life. You can see how cold he is just by looking in his eyes. He's an evil person. I grew up in a town full of murderers and abusers, and I had never seen this kind of evil in my life. And I never want to again. I asked to have my name stricken from the records and asked to remain anonymous in case he ever got out. I'm so glad I did because today I got a letter from the state. He's being released in February. The court only had my old address, my parents' house, and my mom didn't think the letter was important. I missed the deadline to protest his release for probation. The plea deal was 8 years, and it's only been 4. Apparently he's getting out early due to overcrowding. Not good behavior, overcrowding, this coming February. And I'm ready if he finds me. My wife, my parents, and everyone I know knows his face and name. If he tries anything, we are all ready. But for his sake, let's not meet. When I was 14, my dad and I lived in a small studio apartment on Hollywood Beach in Florida. We didn't have hardly any money, but we treated ourselves to take out every other Thursday from the same Chinese place a few blocks away. They were family run, so the same guy came to deliver the food pretty much every time. We found out later he was the adult son of the woman who owned the restaurant. It was my job every other Thursday to answer the door and pay for the food, while my dad found something on TV for us to watch while we ate. He was short, with gray hair and glasses. I was friendly, but not talkative. At 14, I was still in my shy stage. We never had a conversation other than the typical hello and have a nice day. During that time, I was left alone a lot. Both my dad and I felt like 14 was old enough to spend a few hours home alone in the afternoons, after school. I was also very close with a woman who lived next door and her goddaughter, so I would spend a lot of time over there when my dad wasn't home. I walked home from school as well, and it was one school day afternoon, an hour or so after I had gotten home, that the phone rang. This was around 2004, so having a house phone was still really common. Ours was set up at the side of the table in the main room of the studio apartment. I answered it, and for a second I thought there was going to be no one on the other end, because there was a long pause. then a sort of stammering that I couldn't understand. Then, "This is Alan," which was barely understandable because of the heavy Asian accent. I say Asian because I'm not sure if it's okay to assume they were Chinese, just because they ran a Chinese restaurant. By now, you obviously know that Alan is the Chinese delivery guy, but at this point, 14-year-old me is confused. Who the hell is Alan? I say something along the lines of, what? And he clarifies, "Your delivery guy. Chinese delivery." Now I am even more confused. What does Alan the delivery guy want? He goes on, "Did you, order food?" "No, we did not," and I tell him so. He is quiet for another second or so. Then, "Are you home alone?" My heart dropped into my stomach. Now I'm pretty sure I know what Alan the delivery guy wants, and yes, I was home alone, but I wasn't about to let him know that. My first instinct was to tell him that my dad was home, but this wouldn't work because his work van wasn't outside, and I realized that Alan had been to our house enough over the last few years to know my dad's van, and if he drove by, he would know he wasn't home. "My uncle is here," I say, and immediately I think it's a horrible attempt at a lie, and Alan is going to know that. "Why?" I challenge him. He's quiet again for a moment, then a statement, not a question. "You are home alone." I am stunned. I have no idea what to say now as I'm trying to think of something. "Never mind," he says and hangs up. I'm so weirded out and scared at this point that even though part of me thinks I actually scared him out of whatever he had planned, another part of me says go lock all of the doors. So I do, front and back. By the time I get to the front room, from locking the back door, I look out the front window and I see a car parked in the driveway. It's Alan, just sitting in his car. The windows are rolled up and lightly tinted, but I can see him behind the steering wheel just staring at my door. 30 seconds later, the house phone starts ringing again. I don't answer it. Alan stays parked in the driveway for about 5 more minutes. I stood looking out the window the whole time, thinking to myself that the second he got out of the car, I was going to grab a knife from the kitchen. Such a dramatic young woman I was. The house phone starts to ring one last time. I don't answer it. As soon as it stops ringing the second time, I pick it up and dial 911. I was terrified. Not only because of Alan, but I was afraid my dad was going to be angry with me for calling the police. It is a completely different story, but he and the law have not always been on the same side, and I was raised with a sort of subliminal aversion to the police, and the idea that anything I couldn't handle myself, my dad could handle for me. Alan drove away while I was on the phone with the 911 operator. I was in the middle of telling her he was calling the house and parked in the driveway, when he just put the car in reverse and sped down the street. The police took a statement from me when they got to my house, then sent me next door to hang out with a neighbor and her goddaughter. We sat on the front porch and I told her the story of what happened, while the officers went down to the restaurant to talk to Alan and contact my dad. In the end, Alan was able to get off with a warning by telling the officers that there was a confusion and he thought that we had ordered food, which his mother confirmed. When asked why he wanted to know if I was home alone, he said he was trying to get an adult on the phone. The police told them that they will have to make someone else make deliveries to customers in my area from now on, and to make sure that Alan keeps his distance. In all honesty, I think it was my dad's phone call to the restaurant later that really made Alan realize he had screwed up, and not the warning from the cops. He was fuming when I told him the story, as I imagine most fathers would be. He called the restaurant and spoke to the woman who owned the place first, then somehow convinced her to put Alan on the phone. What followed was one of the greatest conversations I have ever heard, even if it was only my dad's side I was hearing. Nothing makes you feel more loved than your dad in macho protection mode. My dad threw insults that I have never even heard of before, and I was in middle school, a kingdom of insult connoisseurs. I knew it was a very serious situation, and I knew that my dad was really angry, but I was in the background stifling laughter into a pillow. At one point, my dad asked Alan what the hell he was thinking for driving over here, to which Alan responded something about being lonely, and my dad said, "If I ever catch you on the street again, Alan, if I even hear that you were near this street, I will make sure that you are lonely for the rest of your life." We stopped eating from that restaurant after that. So I work at a pizza place. usually inside the restaurant as my insurance does not cover claims when driving for business. But occasionally, I will cover a delivery shift for one of the drivers because the money is good. Our delivery area includes a few new development, upper middle class cookie cutter neighborhoods, bad tips, an older 1940s era village, average tips, 2 apartment complexes, great tips, some trailer parks, great tips or no tips at all, and a bunch of rural areas, usually good tips. Not rural to the point of seeing hundreds of stars at night, but enough that you couldn't hear your neighbors yell. So about a week ago, I was covering a delivery shift. I came back to the shop feeling pretty good. I'm averaging $5 a delivery so far, and they have all been pretty close. And I checked to see if I have any more deliveries to do. And I do. I have one to an address I have never seen before. We mostly have regulars get deliveries, so an address that doesn't seem the least bit familiar is odd. It's out on one of the more rural roads. I asked the kid who took the order what was up because there were special instructions on the ticket. He says, they said go around back because the front door is not operational. I'm like, okay, well that's not that uncommon. People often want you to go around to the back. Either they painted the door recently, or the house shifted and it's a bitch to open, or they are just hanging out in the back. So as I'm driving out to the house, I get an odd feeling. I don't really like the idea of going to the back of some house out in the sticks. It would all be too easy for some thugs to order a pizza to an abandoned house. There are quite a few in the more rural areas. Then jump the delivery guy. I figure I'll scope the place out when I get there, and if it seems sketchy, just call them and make some bullshit up about how it's against company policy to go around the back of houses to prevent robberies. As I am driving to the house, I realize it's towards the end of this road that gets less populated the further down you go. Great. I'm pretty near the address and driving slow. I see this house that is abandoned looking and set back from the roads with no address and in a bunch of trees. I think, this house better not be it. So I drive past and check the next house's address, and lo and behold, that abandoned looking one was the right house. Shit. At this point, I am not super worried though, because out in the boonies, the standards of upkeep on your house are pretty low, so a house in disrepair isn't necessarily unusual. So I double back to this house and I pull into the driveway. At this point, I'm getting bad vibes. It just doesn't feel right. So I park my car at the very end of the driveway with the rear of the car on the shoulder so anyone passing by can clearly see it. At this point, I call back to the shop and tell them I'm at this sketchy house, and if I don't call back in 4 or 5 minutes to call me, and if I don't answer, call the cops. While I'm on the phone, I take a chance to take a good look at the house. It looks extremely abandoned and not just in disrepair. The driveway is crumbling, bits of gravel, and there are weeds growing out of it. There is no mailbox, no trash cans, no car, no lawnmowers, no landscaping, no kids' toys. Absolutely nothing in the yard. The yard hasn't been mowed in what looks like years. The house is total crap, and the roof is all but falling apart. The siding is falling apart, and even the back deck, which comes around the side, is falling apart. The only part of this house that looks even a little bit decent is the allegedly non-functioning front door. The windows are all shut. It's like 95 degrees and humid, and this place does not have an AC. They all have the blinds or curtains shut. The few that aren't are actually boarded up. I don't even see any wires running to this house. It's not dark yet, but it's dusk, and there isn't a sign of any lights on in the house. At this point, I'm starting to get a little bit nervous. I'm a 5'10 male, 180 pounds, but not in any great shape. But I did take karate for 10 years, so I'm not completely helpless. But I do try to avoid any sort of confrontation I can, as I'm mostly a pacifist. I'm not too concerned about getting robbed. No skin off my teeth, it's not my money. I mean, I would rather not get robbed, but I'm mostly worried about getting jumped or killed. It's a fairly safe area, but recently there have been some rather unsavory people moving in from the city. A big spike in home invasions and robberies, but more worrying, a few stabbings and assaults. So it's either time to nut up or shut up. I'm not just going to go charging in there like a fool, so I get out my phone and call the number they gave when ordering. While I'm doing that, I'm also getting the pizza out and make sure to leave my door open. A running car half in the road at an abandoned house with the door open looks suspicious, right? I figure if shit goes down, it might look out of place enough to make someone stop. Not that there is really any traffic this far down the road. I'm starting to walk up to the house while the phone's ringing. It rings twice, and then an automated message comes on. It says something along the lines of this phone number is associated with an internet texting app. One of the ones that you download, and it lets you send free text from a different phone number over a data connection. I think it's called Haywire. We have had issues with people using numbers from those services for pranks in the past. This is a huge red flag. My heart is now pounding in my throat and my whole body is telling me to bail. I don't want to get a reputation for being a flaky bitch as a driver and lose any future delivery shifts, and that is why I have not bailed yet. So I'm just standing there holding the pizza, looking at this house, but not wanting to venture around to the back of it. I'm hoping that the resident will look out of the window and come out by the road to get their food. So I am looking at the front windows, checking for some sign of life. I could see a blind go up the one window next to the front door, and a really creepy looking guy with a hat pulled low and big sunglasses on is looking out. Remember, he is in a completely dark house surrounded by trees. At dusk, there is no reason for him to be wearing sunglasses. I also see what appears to be a big guy standing behind him in the room. This could have been anything though. When he sees me looking at him, he mouths something and he darts away, presumably towards the allegedly broken front door. At this point, I noped the hell out of there. I had stayed pretty close to my car, so it was only a few steps away. I jumped into the driver's seat and threw the pizza into my passenger seat. Something I would never do since I'm really anal about keeping my car clean. I slam it into reverse before I get the clutch all the way in, so I grind my gears a little. Again, something I never do. Without looking, I simultaneously slam and lock my door and floor it backwards onto the main road. I didn't even check for cross traffic. Really stupid on my part. I start to drive away and look back at the house. The screen door on the outside of the front door is now open, but the front door is still shut. The guy isn't out in the yard yelling, "Wait, come back," or anything. He's just gone. So I pull over a little ways up the road to call back to shop and tell them I'm all good and I'll elaborate when I get back. The people never called back to inquire about their food. People usually like to call if their pizza is 15 minutes late, and these people never got it, so it's pretty strange that they didn't call. Pretty much confirms to me that they were up to no good. After telling my coworkers about it, we concluded it was definitely a robbery at the very least. So we put the address and phone number on our no deliveries list and ate their pizza. I doubt I would have actually gotten murdered or anything. Robbed with maybe a gun or a knife pulled on me. Or a little roughing up, yes, but it was still very unnerving that I easily could have gotten into some serious trouble by just doing my job. Especially if the idiots picked a slightly less abandoned house to set up at.